Maritime and Economic or Business History. The study of the legal framework and economic institution underpinning maritime business in the pre-modern period is extremely relevant to all the debates just mentioned and can provide plenty of interesting material to further them. The past 2 decades have seen a comprehensive re-evaluation of economic growth within the early modern period, and within this revisionist trend, the maritime sector has taken pride of place. Social and economic analysis of the pre-modern European maritime sector is opening new areas that are extremely relevant to both business and economic historians. In particular, the study of commercial litigation is providing a deeper understanding of those interactions between states that shape early modern European political economy, as these controversies embody wider concern about international commercial competition. Given that maritime trade was characterized by transnationality in the early modern period, analysis of its legal controversies, be this about wakes or jurisdictional boundaries, is an excellent testing ground of the interaction between different pathways of economic development and their legal framework. In other words, between different national varieties of capitalism. This approach also allows a revisitation of the Keynesian theme of uncertainty, somewhat neglected by neoclassic orthodoxy yet essential to the analysis of any aspect of maritime trade. The specific Venetian, more than a generally Italian, angle is especially relevant here as the topic of maritime trade and risk evaluation, both in commercial and military terms, were pioneered by Frederick Lane within the history of Venice, thanks to the particular state-run version of capitalism that flourished there. The Venetian way to capitalism is in itself a somewhat distinct path of development, even when compared with that of other Italian states. Venice's economy first developed services, then trade, then agriculture and manufacture in reverse order to the traditional narrative. These peculiarities, frequently articulated in terms of uniqueness, have somewhat limited the presence of Venice within comparative analysis, even within the Italian peninsula on the one hand. On the other hand, they form the bedrock of Lane's own contribution to the origin of capitalism narrative, not only positing the primacy of Venice in being capitalistic in the sense that its ruling class made their livelihood by employing wealth in the form of commercial capital, but also and possibly more controversially arguing that the Venetian ruling class used their control of government to increase their profit. This alternative approach allowed Lane to arrive at the conceptualization of protection costs, the relevance of which goes well beyond the history of Venice and indeed of capitalism proper. Moving from the medieval to the early modern period, the maritime sector achieved in these later centuries a far wider importance as the main tool of European global expansion. Seamen were both the essential protagonists of the fastest growing sector in the European economy and the necessary tool of state or empire expansion and defense. Their entire lives were spent at the frontier between these two realities and differing rhetorical discourse, and this had important consequences beyond their economic treatment, affecting the condition of their employment at large, both during and after their working lives, as it also shaped their social status and their reputation as a professional category. Wage litigation and risk management. The starting point of my investigation was the wealth of legal controversies I discovered in Italian state archive, which showed how Northern European seamen, primarily English but also Dutch, tried to use to their advantage the more worker-friendly policies in Italy in order to enforce their existing agreement and at the same time to achieve better economic condition from their masters or captains. I originally conceived this comparative study of maritime employment during the early modern period as the juxtaposition of different national strategies and attitudes concerning wage laborers and their juridical and social status. I posited the issue of northern crews in the Mediterranean and the reason for their success as a simple case of comparative advantage. Northerners paid their crew less often and thus enjoyed a larger availability of capital during their business cycle. I reason exclusively in economic terms, presupposing that given that personnel wages are a cost that is not very compressible, delaying their disbursement had the immediate effect of increasing the working capital of their master and merchant. However, the evidence showed a far more complex situation. What I and my team discovered in the archive was a less linear story in that a simple juxtaposition between ship and crews of different nations was tempered by an impressive amount of transnational shipping. It quickly became evident that the Northerners in that period were true protagonists of intra-Mediterranean trade, with the corollary result being that they frequently employed multinational crews and provided transport services for a truly varied and international set of merchants. Classic British scholarly literature had posited a simple equivalence between the nationality of shipping and that of trade. However, this most definitely proved not to be the case. Then as now, transport and trade are two rather different analytical categories, and we historians should pay far more attention to this fact. Still, comparison between national systems confirms some truly stark differences. The bottom line was that in general, the agreement finalized in the north of Europe included substantially worse contractual conditions than those available in Italy. Working and living in close contact with crewmen coming from different countries with different customary regulation, northern seamen in the Mediterranean learned of these differences and took advantage of them in an attempt to improve their own situation. The problem wasn't so much the amount of pay itself as a general stability and convergence of figures emerged from the document. Rather, what truly differed was the manner and frequency of wage disbursement. In the north of Europe generally, after an advance, usually equivalent to 2 months' wages and frequently paid straight to the seamen families, was paid at the moment of the agreement itself. The rest of the wages were paid only if and when the voyage was concluded, which meant when the ship returned to her original port of departure. With vessels frequently re-employed within the Mediterranean, often spending years sailing there, this was clearly not a viable option, and renegotiation between master and crews about destination and wakes become the norm, thus multiplying the opportunities for disagreement and legal challenges. As masters and ship owners employed any possible delaying tactic to avoid actually disbursing the entirety of due wages to their crews, this led to increased litigation, which frequently ended up in court even though arbitration was also a possible avenue of extrajudicial resolution. The issue of delayed wage disbursement with its trail of litigation remained a constant issue behind the presence of English seafarers in the Mediterranean throughout the second half of the 17th century. Thank you.